What's up, everyone? Matt Gajewski here, back again talking college football. And today we are breaking down the Vanderbilt roster ahead of 2025, everyone's favorite SEC team. Before we get started, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. It helps a lot. I really appreciate anyone that's taken the time to do that. Thank you. Our analytics show that about 85% of people are not subscribed, so it really does help a small content channel like this a ton. Usual disclaimer, we're recording this on May 6th. If there's something I missed, please let me know in the comment section, or if you just disagree, if there's criticism for a potential position group, something like that, doesn't mean we don't like Vanderbilt's roster. We're all trying to get better here. So thank you if you've left a comment as well. Let's dive into what we saw last year and what we can deduce moving forward about Vanderbilt's roster and prospects. Here are the efficiency metrics for Vanderbilt from the 2024 season. The biggest concern offensively with this team was obviously their offensive line, something they've taken actually a lot of steps to address this year. And it's actually pretty incredible how well this team played despite having an offensive line that was among the worst in the SEC. And that's including, the decimated Oklahoma offensive line, the South Carolina offensive line. This one was right up there with it. Defensively, they definitely struggled. Their best unit was their run defense. They also had a couple injuries on the front seven, so that was something that they were kind of coming into the year a little bit hamstrung. They changed some parts of their staff last year, so now that there's a little more continuity, expecting some steps forward, especially on offense, they changed their entire system there. So now it's a little bit gimmicky. They're going to play slow, very run heavy, run a lot of option stuff with the quarterback. And hopefully defensively, they did change out a DC. They can maybe get a little bit better on this side of the ball. But this is where they finished overall. Their record was 7-6. They hit a bowl game. It was a big surprise for a team that had a win total of 2.5, 3.5 in some spots. This team didn't get blown out once, not one time. Obviously, they had the monstrous win against Alabama, and the worst loss came against Georgia State. But outside of the Alabama win, this team beat Virginia Tech in the opener. They beat Kentucky. They beat Auburn by 10 points. They also beat Georgia Tech in the bowl game. And among their losses, this is a great body of work. Missouri by 3 points. They lost to Texas by 3 points. Their worst loss came to South Carolina. That was a 21-point loss. Only 2 of their L's were by double digits, the other one coming to Tennessee. They lost to LSU by a touchdown. So an incredible season for Vanderbilt compared to expectations. They move into year 5 with Clark Lee, previously of Penn State, mainly a defensive coach. His record is 16-33 since taking over. Last year was probably the best year that they've had under him, first bowl game that they had under him for sure. And part of the reason they had so much success is they changed offensive coordinators to Tim Beck. Now back for his second season, previously of New Mexico State. Obviously, the continuity with Diego Pavia there certainly helped. Good offense for this kind of team in the SEC. On defense, they bring in a new coordinator, Steve Gregory. It's actually an internal promotion. He was the associate DC last year. Previously, he coached safeties in the NFL. Their old DC, Nick Howell, is currently at Utah State. So that's what we have for a backstop from last year's efficiency metrics. Let's look at their recruiting, talent acquisition, and retention. So up at the top, we have the recruiting rankings from the last 3 seasons, where that ranks in the SEC, how much of each class they have retained. And it's Vanderbilt. This should come as no surprise. They are the worst recruiting team in the conference. They have some academic stuff to worry about. And from there, they're kind of playing a different ball game than almost every other single SEC team. Biggest problem I have is their retention. Only 52% of that 2023 class. Last year's class is up at 80%. But they are a team that gets picked over quite a bit when they do discover a diamond in the rough. So they need to paper over some of this with the transfer portal. That has not always been a resource that they've used a ton. Admissions are key with this school, obviously. This year, they're 34th. Last year, they were 39th. The year prior, 2023, they were 87th. So a little bit better there. But it just kind of is what it is with Vanderbilt. They are going to have to be a team that wins with less. Let's dive into the depth chart for this upcoming season. I'll bring you behind the glass to the 2 deep depth chart we've created. This is available in Discord. There's a small fee, but the link is going to stay the same all summer. You could jump in for a week and take advantage of this if you want. We'll continually add teams day by day. But what it is, looking at everyone who might contribute in a two-deep format, their experience based on year in school, then we have their snaps over the last 2 years, and on the far right, a value score. The value score takes into account your recruiting, and then the more snaps you play, the less it looks at recruiting and the more it looks at on-field play. Players in yellow are transfers, and then we have all of the roster change stuff on the right, whether it's incoming transfers, departing, and then graduating players or just transfers and how many snaps they play. So this is where we stand with Vanderbilt. They do have Diego Pavia back. Initially unexpected, but he takes out a lawsuit against the NCAA, receives an injunction. This is the JUCO legislation that's still being decided, but it looks like he's going to play this year. So Pavia is back again. It's really hard to overstate how much he means to this team. There's a strong argument he's the most valuable player in the SEC. Invaluable because he's working with such little talent around him. Comes over from New Mexico State, completes 59.5% of his passes, over 2,200 yards, 7.5 yards per attempt. He was actually at 7.7, 20 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 19 big-time throws, 5 turnover-worthy plays, elite mobility, 801 rushing yards. That's 4.2 yards per carry. Finished as the 11th most efficient QB in college football, and a big part of that is the lack of turnovers, which has been a staple of Pavia's game going all the way back to New Mexico State. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way. When he is under pressure, a lot of times he's just scrambling out and using the elite mobility to pick up tough yards, which is awesome because, one, you're not taking sacks, and two, you're not throwing difficult passes into tight windows that eventually could be intercepted. So it's not only what he's done with the big plays, but it's also extending drives and not taking these drive-killing plays like sacks and interceptions. So he's the most valuable player on the team. It's not even close. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC for what he's asked to do. They have nothing behind him. Drew Dickey and Blaze Berlowitz are still there. Berlowitz comes over from New Mexico State alongside Pavia, but neither of these players has a lot of experience. If Pavia goes down, this team is cooked. At running back, they do return former 4-star Cedric Alexander. He's 5'9", 200 pounds. Rushed for 586 yards last year. That was just a modest 3.6 yards per carry. Did have 23 catches. But yeah, not the most efficient rushing season. Obviously, their O-line being outside the top 100 did not do them favors. But he's not the only one back. AJ Newberry's back. Rushed 41 times last year, 4.5 yards per carry. Chase Gillespie's back. He only rushed 15 times. But basically, most of the players that received carries on this team are back. They also get back McKylan Young. Didn't play last year, but he was originally a New Mexico State transfer. And what this shows is Vanderbilt's kind of doubling down on their RB room. I think that makes sense. They have some talented players. And then Pavia is such a big part of the run game too, where I'm kind of okay with what they have. It's not going to be the best in the SEC, but it's a lot of returning production under a good offensive system. Receiver returns a fair amount as well. Their top receiver last year, Junior Sherrill, is back. 5'11", 188 pounds. He caught 29 balls for 411 yards. Big perimeter receiver. 83% came out wide. Yards per route, 1.34. Not great, but veteran receiver on this team now. They also returned Richie Hoskins, a former walk-on, 11 catches last year. He's 6'1", 196. He was a slot receiver who just didn't get a lot of work. And if it seems like these receivers are bad, it's just that their number one pass catcher was a tight end. So think Sherrill is at best the number 2 option. Hoskins is behind him. When your number one read is a tight end, these players just aren't going to be asked to do as much. But having them back, you don't have to change the offense very much. With that said, they went out and did add some talent. Chance Fitzgerald comes in from Virginia Tech. He's a former 4-star. Never caught a pass in college so far, but 6'2", 191. He's just more talented than a lot of players in this offense. They bring Trent Hudson in. He played at Mississippi State last year. But this is a guy that was previously with Pavia at New Mexico State. He's 6'3", 180 pounds, caught 35 balls for 571 yards and 10 touchdowns with Pavia in 2023. Big perimeter receiver, 99% of the time he was out there. 2.36 yards per route in that season with Pavia, so that's awesome. And then lastly, they bring in Trey Richardson from Washburn, D2 transfer. He tried to transfer around the country a couple times now. He actually spent last spring with Toledo, but then he left the Rockets and decided to finish out last year at D2, so he comes over as well. They also have former Ole Miss transfer Jeremiah Dillon. He didn't play last year, but he's back. Tristan Brown and Joseph McVeigh have played a little bit. It's not the strongest wide receiver core in the SEC by any means, but there's a lot of continuity, and the transfer should help push these players to somewhat of a higher ceiling than what we saw last year. And that's before we even get to the tight end position. There's a lot of variability with this offense because of what Eli Stowers gives you. Originally, Stowers was with Texas A&M, makes a pit stop at New Mexico State, where he first bursts on the scene with Pavia. And then last year, this is a player that caught 49 balls for 683 yards, led Vanderbilt. Decent blocker as well. He's 6'4", 235. However, he is usually going to be playing wide receiver. 72% of his snaps came in the slot. He also had 34 carries over the last 2 seasons, so he's a somewhat gadget-type player that you can use across the formation. And the reason you can use him in these cool ways, partially at least, is that you have other tight ends on the roster like Cole Spence, who's not really a pass catcher, but he's 6'7", 243, more of a blocker. So that allows you to play some 12 personnel, and then you can move Eli Stowers into the slot. They also have 79 snaps back from Gabe Fisher. They added a 4-star in Whit Edwards. He's now a sophomore. And it made sense. We didn't see a lot of Whit Edwards last year. He came in at 200 pounds, so that was just a guy that was going to need to get in the weight room. But overall, tight end, receiver, pass catchers, this should be slightly upgraded from last year, and it's partially because of the talent they bring in, but also they're going to have a lot of year-over-year development just returning veterans. Offensive line. All right, this was the worst unit on the team by a mile. They only returned 1 starter, which I think you could just argue is addition by subtraction. It's Chase Mitchell. He comes over from Liberty originally, and then last year he plays at a below-average level. That's not super surprising considering he was right around average at Liberty, which is in Conference USA. Allowed 24 pressures on 797 snaps. He's the only returner, but I'm not sure he's even a lock to retain this position. And maybe they move him into guard. I'm not sure what they're going to do with Chase Mitchell, but let's look at all the transfers they bring in because this looks like it's going to be a completely remade unit. Isaiah Glass, the first transfer over from Oklahoma State, played 656 snaps last year, but he's also played with Arizona State. He was the starter there before Oklahoma State, has played a lot of left tackles, played a little right tackle. Last year, he was a great pass blocker, only 15 pressures allowed, struggled a little bit in the run game, but he's an immediate upgrade on what we saw last year. They also add Bryce Henderson, who's 6'8", 325 pounds. He comes over from South Dakota, where he was a 3-year starter. Primarily a right tackle at the FCS level, but elite run blocker, pretty good pass blocker, 20 pressures and 793 snaps. I think those are the favorites to play tackle right now if the season started today. At guard, more questions here. Again, I think Chase Mitchell could potentially move into one of these spots. They also add in the now well-traveled Sterling Porscher, who played last year at Texas Tech. He originally was a JUCO guy, transferred to Middle Tennessee State, then to Texas Tech. Last year, he mostly played left guard, but out of all of the stops we've just mentioned, he is still yet to even reach average production. Last year, he allowed 22 pressures, and he's actually allowed over 22 pressures in every year he started. So that's not the best, I guess, strongest position is the better way to say that, but he at least is experienced. Right guard, they have Kiva Wesley. He lost his job after starting 5 games last year. Pretty bad on 371 snaps. There are other transfers that we'll get to. One of them is Virginia Tech 4-star Gunnar Givens, only 3 snaps of experience, but I think there's a good chance he beats out either Porschler or Wesley. We'll see. So the interior, at least at guard, is a little unsettled. Center should be held down by Jordan White from Liberty, originally with West Virginia. He started the last 2 seasons with Liberty. He's played center and left guard, so he gives you some interior versatility. Only allowed 5 pressures last year. He's an elite option. So I guess the center position or guard, wherever they put Jordan White, should be held down. And some other candidates that could potentially push Porsche, Wesley, Chase Mitchell, whomstever. They added Northern Arizona transfer Clinton Azubuike, very inexperienced. Orion Irving comes over from Sam Houston State, played 477 snaps last year, started the last 3 games. There's almost no way to argue the offensive line is worse. They are more talented. I do not think this is near the top of the SEC, but rather than be outside the top 100, I think Vanderbilt's pushing for average play, maybe in the 60s, 70s, which would be huge for Pavia, just escaping pressure and not running for his life constantly. So expecting offensive line upgrades for Vanderbilt, whoever they decide to settle on in the starting five for this unit. They just have more options and more talent. Defense. They returned their top 3 edge rushers. This group was awful last year, but experience isn't the worst thing, and they do have some talent coming in this unit. Miles Capers is back after 517 snaps, had 23 pressures, good run defender. Corday Sindor is back after 32 pressures, not the best run defender, but he's a Purdue transfer originally. And then they have Linus Zunk back, who had 367 around average snaps, which is how you get to some of the metrics that we saw from Vanderbilt last year. Probably the best place that we could look to this team is the transfer portal, where they bring in a former 4-star from Alabama, Keanu Coate. Only 106 snaps, a little bit of some off-the-field stuff with Coate, but you just don't get a lot of 4-stars from Bama coming into the program. So the edge group, nowhere to go but up. At defensive tackle, I think it's probably the same. They bring in a lot of transfers, and maybe some of these guys kick out to the edge, but Aaron Bryant comes over from Texas, Jalen Stone from SEMO, Mason Nelson from Western Michigan, Joshua Singh from BYU, and Terry Nwabuisi Azalea from North Carolina. Nwabuisi Azalea is a freshman. They flipped him after the spring. He leaves North Carolina. And then we go to some of the other transfers. Mason Nelson from Western Michigan. He was a starter the last 2 seasons. Solid numbers, 31 pressures over that span from the interior. Stone from SEMO was a run stuffer, but that's at the FCS level. He's only 290 pounds, so a little bit undersized. And then Aaron Bryant from Texas is a former 4-star. Hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities, but he is the highest caliber recruit among the defensive tackle room. Then finally, Singh only played 311 snaps in his career with BYU. I don't think this is a strong candidate to play much for this unit, but we'll see on that. And all of that doesn't even include the players they return. They still have 4 defensive tackles that are experienced to some degree. Yolanda Wacha played 534 snaps last year. Glenn Seabrooks played 340. He was very good as a run defender. Bradley Mann played 380. And then they also get back former Middle Tennessee State transfer Zan Wood, who got hurt just 3 games into last year. So as you can see, there's a lot more names, a lot more depth on the defensive line. And that's not even all in D2 deep. If you want to scroll down and see the rest, there is a ton of defensive linemen that just fill out the reserves for this team. They have nowhere to go but up. Linebacker was maybe the best position for this Vanderbilt defense last year, and they returned both starters. Brian Longwell and Langston Patterson are back. Longwell led the team with 89 tackles in his first year as a starter last year. Excellent run defender. His biggest concern was coverage. He did allow 22 catches on 30 targets, 320 yards, so some big plays there too. Patterson, he was second on the team with 78 tackles. He was a little more balanced across the board, not quite as strong as a run defender, but certainly better in pass coverage. And they also have some depth here. They got 122 snaps from Prince Colley. He's a former 4-star with Notre Dame. Nick Rinaldi played 351. Even Bryce Cowarn, he was at 128. So linebacker is a good position. It's deep. And then finally, defensive back, they returned both boundary corners, Martell Height and Colby Taylor. Height started the last 2 years. He was very good last year, 3 PBUs, 2 picks. I think he is one that is locked in. Taylor, I'm not so sure. He's a former Wyoming transfer, only played 373 snaps last year, struggled a lot, allowed an 80% completion percentage. So I think maybe they turn to Jalen Lackey, who played 304 snaps. He was an upgrade on Taylor, but still a little bit below average. The wild card here is they do get back Eastern Washington transfer Marlon Jones. I think he missed last year with a cancer diagnosis, so he is still a wild card in his availability this upcoming year, but would certainly add an extra body to the corner room that they could use. At nickel, Randon Fontanet is back, previously of TCU. Started last year, played above average across the board. And there's some more depth here because Jordan Matthews comes in from Tennessee. He was a nickel at Tennessee, a former 4-star, but I think there's a chance maybe they move him to outside corner, considering one of those positions is unsettled. They could move pieces around in the secondary, but adding a 4-star is awesome, of course. Also got back 176 snaps from Trudell Berry, who's played a lot over the last 2 years. Safeties may be a bigger concern. They lose DeRicky Wright, the leader of their defense the last couple of years, and CJ Taylor. So their most experienced returner is Dante Carter, who is one of the rare 4-stars that Vanderbilt has recruited. Played 158 snaps last year. I think he's rewarded this year with extra playing time. And they also land FAU transfer CJ Hurd, who's been very good. He had 654 snaps last year, only allowed 155 yards. He made 71 tackles. An awesome transfer to come into this position. From there, not as deep as corner, but for depth pieces, Marlon Sewell's played 498 snaps over 4 years. Jalen Gilbert played a little bit last year. There are more bodies in the defensive backfield, and similar to the offensive line, I'm just not sure how they construct this unit as a whole and piece it all together. But there are players who should be on the field, upgrading what we had last year. At kicker, Brock Taylor's back, the 27th most efficient kicker in college football last year. 39 of 40 on extra points, 18 of 21 on field goals. He made 5 of 6 from 50 plus, so he's got some rare range. Special teams, at least the problems they had on special teams last year had nothing to do with the kicking game. So Brock Wright, excellent kicker for Vanderbilt, should help them win some close games. But let's dive into the schedule. We talked roster and what to expect. It is a shockingly good Vanderbilt roster, I will say. Better than I think what a lot of teams are going to put. Not a lot of teams. A lot of teams in the country, maybe a couple teams in the SEC. We actually have them power rated ahead of Mississippi State. So not the worst team, second worst. All right. The schedule. They open up against Charleston Southern. It's a weird non-con. After that, they have to travel to Virginia Tech, who is going to try to get revenge on Vanderbilt after Vanderbilt won the game last year. From there, they play Georgia State, who Vanderbilt hopes to get revenge on from last year as well. And it ends up being a weird non-con with Utah State to close it out. But right away, I think you're looking at 3-1 at worst. Virginia Tech is a pretty weird team coming into this year. I'm expecting this to be close to a pick'em, with the home site being at Virginia Tech. But right now, I would make Vanderbilt a slight favorite in the game. It'll be close. The real meat of the schedule comes down to the SEC play, and it's tough when you're already at the bottom of this conference, but it's definitely not an easy schedule for Vanderbilt. They dodge Georgia and Texas A&M, but they face Alabama and Texas, and they're both on the road. That's the top of the conference. Definitely no favors done there. You do draw a couple teams from the bottom. Tennessee, that's a road trip to close the season, obviously, in state, and then you have Kentucky. But otherwise, no Mississippi State, no Arkansas. You play a lot of the middle teams. You play LSU, you play Auburn, you play Missouri, you play South Carolina. Some of those are on the road. It's going to be a challenge for this Vanderbilt team to reach bowl eligibility, but they are definitely not dead. You have at least 3 wins in non-con when you're fully healthy. And then this is a team that is dangerous and should be able to pick off 1 or 2 teams in conference again. Think about how good they finished last year. Most of that team is back. The one unit that got absolutely overturned was the offensive line, and that's a positive. So expecting Vanderbilt to be pretty good. I don't think they're going to reach a bowl, but it's going to be close, probably a 5-win season. Somewhere in the 5 to 7 range, I think, is where Vanderbilt settles this year, depending on how they can play against the middle of the SEC. And it's not an indictment on them. Really what it is, the middle of the SEC is better this year. A lot of the teams like Auburn, LSU, Missouri have invested in their programs a lot year over year. You can check out those videos if you'd like. They're available below. Otherwise, we'll be back again soon with more content. Until then, good luck. We'll see you guys later.